May 22, 1969. Port Harcourt, Nigeria. The heat doesn't just sit in the air, it attacks. Every breath feels like a negotiation with the atmosphere itself. On the military tarmac, metal aircraft gleam under the merciless sun, arranged in precise rows that speak of order, confidence, and the unshakable certainty of technological superiority. Il-28 bombers stand ready, twin-engine Soviet machinery designed to deliver punishment from altitude, where war is clean and decisive. Nearby, MiG-17 fighters wait with their swept wings and aggressive intakes, built for speed and interception, built to dominate a sky that belongs to whoever can afford the fuel to patrol it. This is the Nigerian Air Force at the height of its power. Behind every aircraft, behind every maintenance schedule and patrol route, lies the fundamental assumption of Cold War doctrine. Superior technology creates superior outcomes. Radar is truth. The sky belongs to the side with jets. Inside the control tower, a radar scope sweeps its endless circle, green line rotating with the hypnotic rhythm of routine. A technician adjusts his headset, drums fingers on a clipboard. This is the atmosphere of victory before the battle, boredom mixed with certainty. On paper, after all, the war is already decided. Nigeria possesses jets, bombers, anti-aircraft systems, foreign advisors, and unlimited fuel. Biafra, blockaded, starving, shrinking week by week, has none of these things. No modern air force, no factories, no spare parts pipeline, just a besieged region fighting with whatever can be salvaged or smuggled through tightening nooses. So, the base settles into comfortable certainty. Guards lean against walls and patches of shade. Mechanics work with the unhurried confidence of men who service machines that won't face a real challenge today. Complacency in war doesn't come from not caring. It comes from believing your enemy is incapable of surprise. Then the first warning arrives, and it's all wrong. Not the roar of jet engines, not the scream of incoming ordnance. Something that doesn't belong in any military briefing. A low, persistent buzzing, like distant lawn equipment. Like angry insects caught somewhere beyond the fence line. A sentry glances up without urgency, because the human brain responds to what it expects to fear. And this sound? This isn't threatening in any language the base understands. That's when the jungle at the airfield's edge seems to tear open. 5 small shadows cut across the tree line, at an absurdly low altitude. So low, they're practically skimming the ground itself. They move slowly, painfully slowly, compared to the jets parked in neat rows. The first human instinct isn't fear, it's confusion bordering on disbelief. The heavy anti-aircraft guns were built to track fast movers, to calculate lead angles on targets screaming across the sky at hundreds of miles per hour. Their crews are trained on speed, altitude, intercept geometry, numbers that make sense when the enemy behaves like an aircraft is supposed to behave. But these things don't behave correctly. They come in under the firing arcs, existing in the dead space between ground clutter and air threat, living in the seam that doctrine forgot to guard. Before anyone can translate what they're seeing into coherent orders, the first rockets leave their rails with blunt, ugly coughs. Crump, crump, like doors slamming in an empty corridor. A rocket impacts the line of Il-28 bombers. Fuel transforms into fire with the instant logic of chemistry and physics. Orange flames bloom into oily black smoke. Heat warps the air into visible waves. Men run without knowing where safety might be. Sirens begin their mechanical screaming, not as warning, but as confession that the base is already behind the moment, already reacting instead of preventing. In the tower, voices stack over each other in rising panic. Identify, identify, identify. While the radar scope shows absolutely nothing, nothing at all, the equipment isn't malfunctioning. It's functioning exactly as designed, filtering out small, low, slow returns as noise. Birds. Ground clutter, weather, rain. The system is doing its job perfectly. Inside the boundaries of the war, it was built to fight. Outside, the attackers bank hard, impossibly tight turns that jets can't match at low altitude without stalling or auguring into the ground. They circle inside the perimeter like they own the space. Rocket after rocket slams into targets. Parked fighters, fuel storage, generators, command facilities. Everything that keeps a modern airbase operational. For a few terrible minutes, a grotesque truth hangs in the air along with the smoke. The most expensive, sophisticated machines here are not defending themselves. They're simply waiting to be destroyed. By the time the buzzing fades back into the tree line, Port Harcourt is burning in scattered pieces. Not just aircraft, confidence itself is on fire. The doctrine is burning. The assumption that this war was a mere cleanup operation is reduced to ash. In Lagos, the news arrives in two distinct forms: frantic radio reports from the scene, and the dull, brutal language of damage assessment forms. Lists as serial numbers, equipment classifications, photographs of wreckage arranged like evidence at a crime scene. The first institutional reaction is predictable: denial wrapped in explanation. This must be foreign intervention. This must be a superpower. Biafra cannot do this. They don't have the money, the technology, the capability. Therefore, someone else must be behind it. France perhaps, Soviet rivals, someone. That logic is seductive because it preserves the familiar world. If the strike was conducted by an advanced sponsor state, then Nigeria's defeat isn't a failure of doctrine. It's merely a temporary capability mismatch, an arms problem, a procurement issue, something you can solve by buying more of what you already trust. So theories multiply in the rooms where uniformed men lean over maps, electronic jamming, covert aircraft, sophisticated countermeasures, whispers of French involvement, shadow logistics networks, proxy warfare. Every hypothesis climbs toward complexity because complexity is comfortable. It implies that control can be restored, but the radar logs refuse to cooperate. They show no high-altitude intrusion, no large signatures, no obvious enemy aircraft conforming to expected profiles. If anything, they show a system serenely filtering away the exact threat that killed it. That's when the first hairline crack appears in the entire structure of assumptions. What if the threat isn't stronger than your technology, but simply smaller than your attention span? What if you're not being overpowered, just bypassed? Orders flow out immediately. Guards doubled at all facilities. Anti-aircraft crews receive additional drills. Patrols expand into new sectors. MiG-17 pilots, men trained to fight in the jet age, to hunt targets at high altitude and high speed, receive humiliating new instructions: hunt low, slow down, scan the tree lines, look for what shouldn't be there. This is where the mathematics becomes cruel. A MiG-17 is a predator built for speed. It needs continuous airflow over the wings, needs forward momentum to maintain lift. There exists a minimum speed below, which it stops being a fighter and becomes a falling object with an expensive engine. A small propeller-driven aircraft, whatever these attackers actually are, can live comfortably in the space below that threshold. It can loiter. It can pivot on a wingtip. It can vanish into a curve of river or a line of palm trees. It can make the landscape itself into camouflage, using terrain the way submarines use depth. Late May, two MiG-17s sweep over the Niger Delta, fuel gauges already ticking downward like countdown timers. The sky is pale and heavy with moisture. Below them, the world is an unreadable tapestry of green. Mangroves, creeks, dirt roads that dissolve into shadows and vegetation. A pilot presses his face closer to the canopy, straining to separate movement from nature, hunting for geometry and organic chaos. Then he sees them. 3 tiny aircraft, high-wing silhouettes, fixed landing gear, painted in colors that fragment them into the swamp environment. They look like civilian trainers, like flying school aircraft, like toys that have no business in a war zone. The MiG pilot's pulse spikes with something beyond mere aggression. It's relief. Finally, a target. Finally, revenge. He pushes the throttle forward, feels the jet surge with power, feels the old logic returning. Speed equals authority, and he has all the speed. He lines up the lead aircraft in his gun sight, finger moving toward the trigger, and the target does something completely outside his training syllabus. It slows, dramatically, almost as if it stops in midair. The MiG, committed to its attack run at hundreds of miles per hour, overshoots in a heartbeat. Too fast, too heavy. Too locked into the physics of jet propulsion. The pilot hauls back on the stick. G-forces crushing into his vision, turning the world into gray tunnels at the edges. He carves a wide turn that consumes miles of airspace. When he returns to the engagement zone, the Mosquito is simply gone, not shot down, not outrun, just erased. Swallowed by the ground it flies beside, hidden in plain sight against terrain that looks identical from every angle. Back at base, a crew chief watches the MiG land and tries not to show what he's thinking. He wipes sweat from his forearm, smearing a dark streak of hydraulic fluid across his skin. The pilot climbs down, helmet tucked under one arm, jaw muscles working like he's chewing on an insult he can't speak aloud. Nobody wants to say it yet, but the Air Force has encountered a new category of enemy, one that doesn't try to win control of the sky. It simply lives beneath it. In the space doctrine, forgot existed. The question transforms into something far more disturbing because it implies a fundamental helplessness. How do you defend against an aircraft you cannot reliably detect and cannot reliably chase? In a fluorescent-lit office in Lagos, someone opens a file folder, thin at first, but growing thicker each day. Inside are photographs from wreckage sites, fragments of rocket casings, witness sketches that vary wildly in detail, and a list of suspected airframes that makes less sense the longer anyone stares at it. On the final page, typed cleanly and almost casually, appears a name. Not fully confirmed yet, but appearing frequently enough to make people deeply uncomfortable. Because if that name is real, the next chapter won't be about a superpower's secret technology. It will be about something far more destabilizing, a human decision so stubborn, so intensely personal, that it transformed a civilian aircraft into a weapon system, and turned Nigeria's modern air doctrine into expensive dead weight. Lagos. The war rooms smell like paper and cold tea. Maps stabbed with colored markers until the coastline looks bruised. Senior officers discuss air superiority, like priests discuss salvation. Absolute, non-negotiable. Yet damage reports keep landing on tables like personal insults. Port Harcourt isn't supposed to be repeatable. It's supposed to be an anomaly that fades once procedures tighten. That's the narrative the system desperately wants, because if it's a methodology, then Nigeria's advantage isn't an advantage at all. It's a liability painted bright and parked in rows. The first institutional response is escalation in the direction of habit and training. More guards stationed at every critical point. More patrols sweeping expanded sectors. Anti-aircraft positions sprouting like defensive mushrooms. MiGs waiting under a sun that cooks canopies, waiting for alarms tuned to the wrong war. On the technical side, conversations become elaborate hunts for explanations. Theories multiply in rooms where uniformed men lean over maps, electronic jamming, foreign military advisors with advanced training, sophisticated countermeasures, whispers of French involvement, shadow logistics networks. Every hypothesis climbs toward complexity, because complexity implies the enemy is expensive, rare, containable. But when investigators sift through physical fragments recovered from impact sites, the story refuses to cooperate with comfortable hypotheses. A bent rocket casing with a serial stamp, 68mm unguided rockets, common ammunition. Whatever hit Port Harcourt didn't need genius electronics, just proximity, timing, and raw nerve. That's when real fear replaces concern. Not being outgunned, but outthought with materials you could buy or improvise. Out in the Delta regions, MiG pilots receive orders to fly lower. They hate it with professional humiliation. Jets were designed to dominate space. Down here, there's only suffocating green. The horizon becomes a wall of vegetation. The air is wet, thick, full of haze and sudden tropical rain that reduces visibility to meters. The cockpit transforms from command throne to claustrophobic tunnel. A MiG needs minimum speed to stay airborne, has a turning radius that's laughable at treetop height. It's built to sprint and hunt with altitude. But the enemy isn't sprinting. It's creeping, lurking, making terrain its accomplice. In Biafra, the story looks nothing like a proper military base. A jungle clearing. Dirt road camouflaged with cut-back bushes and tied branches. The mud scarred by aircraft tires that have no business there. No hangar, just canvas sheeting. No fuel truck, just a battered vehicle and rusty drums. Hands work a manual pump. Slow, stubborn rotations. Can't rush. Spilled fuel is lost forever. A spark could end everything. Forearms knotted with effort. Shirt soaked through. The operation runs on time measured in minutes. A small aircraft hides under camouflage netting, like a hunted animal. High wing, fixed landing gear, light airframe. Not a warplane by Lagos standards, more like a civilian trainer, something for teaching weekend flying. The rockets mounted on wings are real enough. Crude mounting points, improvised, bolted tight, like desperate engineering under impossible constraints. A mechanic runs his hand along the metal attachments, checking for any looseness the way a climber checks rope knots before stepping off a ledge into empty space. A pilot climbs into the cramped cockpit and does something that would infuriate any modern commander. He draws a line on the windscreen with grease pencil, a crude cross, a reference mark, an aiming point. Not sophistication. Repeatability. That's what large systems underestimate. The power of repeatable simplicity. You don't need perfection. You need consistency enough that the next rocket hits within meters, not kilometers. Harness tightened, ignition checked. The engine coughs, catches, settles into a buzzing growl. Something underpowered refusing to accept its irrelevance. This is when the name becomes more than rumor. Count Carl Gustaf von Rosen. A Swedish aristocrat with a resume that makes no sense here. Known for humanitarian aid flights, mercy operations. A man at retirement age choosing private war over comfortable safety. Nigeria's command tries to fit him into boxes. Mercenary, fanatic, foreign provocateur. But none explain the dangerous truth. He's not just flying. He's organizing, teaching, creating a methodology that does not die when he dies, that can be taught to others and repeated by those who follow. That's the real contagion. Not a rogue pilot, a transmissible concept. Because concepts spread faster than spare parts ship. And this concept is brutally simple. If enemy sensors and jets are optimized for high-altitude, high-speed targets, you exist low and slow. If their infrastructure is expensive and static, yours is cheap and mobile. If they need concrete, you use dirt. If they need supply chains, you use hands. Not romantic. Logistics reduced to first principles. Subsequent strikes feel different. They stop being anomalies and become pattern. Oil installations burn. Power infrastructure collapses. Targets that embarrass more than they destroy materially. These attacks force uncomfortable questions about security procedures, operational competence, and fundamental control at the highest command levels. The psychological effect is disproportionate to explosive weight. Now, every sound is suspicious. A generator hums and a soldier looks up. A motorbike passes and gun crews shift aim. War doesn't need to kill you to change you, just make you uncertain when you used to be calm. Nigeria adapts by adding layers. Camouflage nets, blast walls, aircraft dispersed, guards rotated, new search patterns, constant low-altitude patrols. But every new defensive layer carries crushing costs. More fuel consumed constantly. More exhaustion accumulated among personnel. More mistakes made under sustained pressure. More resentment building among soldiers, asked to maintain impossible vigilance. The machine grinds itself down, covering a gap that wasn't supposed to exist. Meanwhile, the air base moves. Road strip today, clearing tomorrow, hidden dirt stretch next. Men push aircraft by hand. Hide them not from pride, but terror of losing their only leverage. A pilot checks his map. Not really a map. Landmarks, riverbend, church spire, palm cluster. Navigation by memory and nerve. He taps the fuel gauge. It offers no comfort, just brutal honesty no propaganda can soften. The paradox: strong where jets are weak, fragile everywhere else. No armor, no redundant systems. One bullet ends it. Every sortie is calculated risk, not heroic, mathematical. This calculation under pressure is what transforms improvisation into doctrine. Lagos confronts uncomfortable truth. Kill von Rosen, the method survives. Shoot down one aircraft, another lifts from an unmarked road. Then the report that changes everything. Not a kill or capture, just a sighting. A soldier claims he saw one land on a road, not highway, not runway, just dirt road, the kind for trucks, not aircraft. Officers laugh initially, they have to. But laughter dies, strangled by realization. If they can use any road, secure rear area is myth. The battlefield is everywhere a straight line exists. The question transforms. How do we defend an entire country? Silence, thick as outside humidity. A finger traces the map deeper into supposedly safe territory. Aircraft parked in rows because nobody believes they can be reached. Then quietly, like confession, they will try for Benin City. Everyone understands instantly, not just another strike, a statement, symbolic destruction, attack on the sanctuary, where the Air Force sleeps confident. If 5 buzzing propeller planes reach that deep, the Cold War logic Nigeria, bought with jets and radar, isn't just flawed, it's inverted. The room jolts to motion. Phones, orders, defenses tightened. Too late. The way defenses are always too late when reacting, not anticipating. Somewhere in bush, under canopy, hiding everything from above. A pilot marks his windscreen steady-handed, checks the mocking fuel gauge, listens to an engine that has no right to threaten anything. Throttle forward, deliberate calm. The babies lift, low, slow, aimed at the one place Nigeria cannot afford to see burn. Benin City, late 1969. Twilight turns the airfield purple. This is where the Nigerian Air Force sleeps. Jets in neat rows, because rules say rebels don't reach sanctuaries this deep. Inside operations, radar sweeps with eternal calm rhythm. Methodical. Confident in sophisticated filtering. Controllers look outward, not down. Waiting for speed, altitude, signatures announcing themselves like honest enemies. The warning arrives as it always does now. Thin buzzing, low and wrong, drifting from dark tree line like a rumor you can't arrest. 5 small shapes over the fence, so close, so sudden, so intimate, the base has no time to become fortress. Only time to become target. Rockets leave rails with brutal hisses like machinery failing. One strikes a MiG-17 directly. The aircraft blooms flame, expensive certainty collapsing to smoke and twisted metal in seconds. Crews scatter, gunners sprint, but sightlines are chaos. Attackers already inside the perimeter, turning impossibly tight, flying absurdly low. Fire discipline breaks on fear of hitting friendlies. Air defenses built for threats from above can't decide how to kill what's skating the runway. 4 minutes. Duration for sanctuary to become evidence. When buzzing fades to darkness, silence is worse than attack. Soviet advisors and Nigerian officers walk smoking wreckage with stiff, shocked posture, understanding something changed beyond budgets. They don't just see burned jets, they see doctrine publicly humiliated. The reveal becomes obscene in elegant simplicity, not a prototype, not stealth miracle. A light trainer, MFI 9B adapted to mini-coin, unguided rockets, improvised mounts, crude reference marks instead of sophisticated targeting. The system searched for genius and conspiracy, found audacity and logistics. But audacity alone doesn't win wars. Biafra's fundamental problem was never just air power, the blockade, shrinking perimeter, brutal arithmetic of hunger and exhaustion compounding daily. Tiny aircraft could burn machines, bruise morale, force changes, create psychological effects disproportionate to payload, but couldn't open sea lanes, couldn't carry food for starving populations, couldn't lift entire peoples from closing strategic traps. So, the story ends as tragedies often end in modern war. Tactical brilliance pressed against strategic inevitability and overwhelming force. January 1970. Biafra collapses under isolation and attrition. The little aircraft, if any survive, don't become trophies. They disappear, dismantled, hidden, burned, denied to enemy cameras. The legend survives not because it won, but because it exposed a crack in logic of technological power and military certainty. The lesson isn't that cheap beats expensive, it's that expensive systems build habits around themselves, habits that calcify into blind spots becoming vulnerabilities. And sometimes, on a dirt runway's humid twilight edge, history pivots on the smallest thing a sophisticated radar was carefully trained to ignore.